Hey, everybody. Give me just 1 second. I am setting up right now, and hopefully this is going to work for me. I'm trying to do a workaround with Zoom because it's being silly on me for going live in Jen O'Sullivan's group. Let's see if this works. 10 more seconds. Thank you for being patient with me. Whew, okay, let's all say a prayer. All right, I think it works. All right. I'm going to keep this page up and hopefully you guys can see it okay. There it is. Woo! I am not tech savvy, so being able to find a workaround is the Lord to get this working for you guys. So hi, my name is Sarah Harnish. I'm a diamond in Young Living, and I'm the author of a whole bunch of books. You guys might know me from the Game Plan book. I think I got a copy of that bad dog right here. This one has sold millions and millions of copies up on Amazon, and it just tells you how to build your business, especially if you don't have any network marketing experience. It's a real help to be able to learn how to start from the ground up. But I spent the pandemic writing another one that has really been on my heart for a few years, because my goal was to put a lot of aromatherapy in one place so that it was easy for you guys to be able to teach and easy for you to be able to share. And I have to be honest with you, I had kind of a double motive doing it because I really feel like in these last few years, since Gary Young, who's the founder of Young Living, has passed away, that we have slowly been starting to lose him. And we've been starting to lose Seed to Seal and lose what all of this is about, lose what Young Living is all about. And I felt like if somebody didn't sit down and pen the story of Young Living and make it easy for people to duplicate and teach, that that was going to be lost. So I hope that you guys really enjoy this. I'm going to be teaching the Gary Young class from the Game Plan Oil Script book, and may it be a blessing to you. I'm going to tag Jen O'Sullivan in this post. You guys can find me, and hopefully this shows up okay. I'm not going live in this page because it's being silly on me, but I am in the page. So all right, here we go. We're up and we're ready to go. Forgive me for the really long introduction. Usually I just jump right in. But I'm just so excited to have a few minutes to share a little bit of Gary Young with you guys, because he is absolutely precious. So I did this on Zoom so that I'll be able to go in and do a quick screen share with you. There we go. You should be able to see. Oh, look it. Doesn't Facebook always freeze your face in the most perfect place? I can copy that. I'll copy that up here. Let me go over and bring up my PowerPoint. So what I have done is I have taken 25 different oils topics and turned them into classes, and then put them in one place, put them in one book. It's called the Game Plan Oils Script Book. It looks like this. We're doing a live class out of this book tonight. The very last class in the book is the Honoring Gary class. So it's right here, and I'm going to teach out of that class for just a few minutes and give you kind of a good sample of the class. So what is the script book? It's brand new. It's just released just in time for convention. And the oils classes are complete classes. So you can just open it, rip it, and read it, as we say in radio, rip and read. So the classes in here are oils, thieves, Ningxia, CBD, the kids class, fearless, how to play with your oils, oils of the Bible, raindrop, feelings, gut health, the four most important Young Living supplements, enzymes, bloom, art, and savvy, the skin class, the hair class, the tooth class, hormones and oils, animal aromatherapy, basic massage for couples, a tour of the Young Living massage oils, intro to diffusers, seedlings, the manly man class, techniques class, so neuroauricular, the ear technique and valor balancing, how to make your own blends, the einkorn class, and then the last class is a tribute to Gary Young. And that's the one that we're going to be going through tonight. There actually is a companion workbook that goes with it. And so this one has coloring sheets so you can see what the oils look like, and affirmations, journaling, action steps, really rare, hard to find bonus training on the oils, and icebreaker games and all sorts of really cool stuff. And then I made a teacher's edition. So that's actually what I'm going to be teaching out of tonight. It's the same book. You put it in a binder and you can pull just the one class that you want out so that it's easy to teach off of. So that's exactly what I have done. I've pulled out the one class that I need, which is the D. Gary Young class right out of this book. And I'm just going to be reading the words right off of this page. We're in the process of designing PowerPoints that are free on my website, oilabilityteam.com. And you can download the PowerPoint in like 2 or 3 minutes. And then you'll be able to teach the classes yourself. So I'll show you. If you go to oilabilityteam.com and you click on share, you'll see the script book button. You just click on that, and then all the PowerPoints are free as I release the classes. They're all free under each of the classes. So I just pray this is a blessing to you guys, and that it really is a shot in the arm coming out of the pandemic for those of you that are building your businesses, and that it gives you some new content, some new excitement, and gets you a point in the right direction. And I made a mini. John and I are the ones that started the minis. That was me with Game Plan, but I actually put all 25 scripts in one place so that you can use this as a tool to market yourself and draw people to your own classes. So there's some highlights from the classes so that people remember 1 to 3 pieces of information from a class. Now they're going to have 10 to 20 pieces of information. There's a heart message on why that topic matters. Why do you want to be concerned about fluoride in toothpaste in the tooth class, right? Some ordering ideas, and then some action steps to turn around and start utilizing some of the stuff from the class. And so all 4 of those are up on my website. So let's jump into Honoring Gary. This is 125. I've got a copy of the class right of the teacher's edition right in front of me, and I'm going to start teaching. So the inside of this class starts with quotes from the diamonds and photos from the diamonds. Dozens of diamonds collected their stories of Gary Young to open every single chapter of this book. So when I'm teaching the classes, I love to start with the Gary Young stories. And this one is from Kathleen Harvey, a sweet diamond friend of mine. She says, December 9th, 2013, Gary and Mary Young came to Michigan for a conference hosted by Karen and Perry Malone, who honored their presence so beautifully that day. I drove 5 hours to be there because Shannon Hudson, a Crossline leader, had taught me that if you have the opportunity to learn about Young Living products within 5 hours, you should be there. Gary's true personality was evident to the many in that room. He shared how he rescued a deer who gotten caught in a barbed wire fence on his property, and how he took oils and time and care to nurse it back to health. And he spoke of his adventures and how he risked his life to bring forth frankincense from Oman to the United States. At the end of about a 5-hour lecture, the man could easily teach for hours. He gathered a huge crowd in a circle to hold hands, and he spoke words of life over us: kindness, prayer, blessing, and then we all sang Amazing Grace. Gary and Mary were prayed over by Karen and Perry, and then they were anointed with Young Living oil. And that same blend was passed around the room, and each person in the room anointed themselves as Gary then prayed over the entire room. It was that day that his seed was planted in my heart to do the same for others. So I don't know where you guys are in your businesses, and what place you are emotionally or mentally or spiritually with your businesses. But I do know I've had the honor of traveling beside this man, and I know that he made an impact on my life for all time. So before I jump into this, I just want to do a shout out to Jen O'Sullivan, who is a sweet friend of mine, a very gifted author. I use her resources for my own team. My personal favorite book of hers, although it's very hard to pick one, but my personal favorite is her French aromatherapy book. I love her supplements book, and I use every resource. The pamphlets we put in all of our purple bags and hand them out. And I know that the work of her hands has been a true blessing to my team personally. So thank you for getting on this page, and thank you for listening to me share a little bit of Gary Young with you. And a huge thank you to Jen for opening up her audience and letting me share from my heart for just a few minutes. It really is always an honor to be able to be asked to speak. And today's pretty special to have a whole day in the lineup and all the hard work that she did to get all these speakers lined up for you guys on the eve of convention really is something pretty spectacular. So with that said, Whenever you open up one of the classes in the script book, one of the first things you're going to see on the top is an estimated read time for the class. We've timed out all the classes so that you have an idea of about how long it's going to take you to get through it. This one is pretty cool class because it's the only one where I have a video at the end of it, and I'm hoping that I'm able to play that for you on Facebook. So let's just keep our fingers crossed it'll let me play the video. But I always love it when you guys start out your classes when you're teaching with your own personal stories. So I'm not going to make any exceptions for this class. Doesn't matter whether it's an einkorn class or an oils of the Bible class. I think it's really important to start with your own experiences with the oils and your own wow moments with the oils. Well, this class isn't on oils. It's on Gary Young, the man that is just a pioneer with essential oils. And if you weren't familiar with Gary and what he did to start Young Living, the next 30 minutes are going to be pretty special blessing for you as you really get into the mind of the founder of this company. So I'm going to share a couple of very brief stories with you, and then we'll jump right into the class. And then I will end by doing some giveaways of my book, just as a thank you to Jen's audience and her fan base for having me on tonight and for getting on and watching. So this is actually when I was walking for Diamond. And I had 4 of my 5 kids with me. Here's number 2, and number 3, and number 4, and number 5. We call him Fuzzy. This is an opportunity I had to meet Gary in a hallway at a beauty school, and we talked for probably a good 25, 30 minutes in the hallway. And he asked me, he said, well, Sarah, he goes, you know, what rank are you right now? And I said, Gary, I've hit platinum. And he said, that's wonderful. He goes, so diamond next month? And I just looked at him. I was like, Gary, it took me like, 8 months to go from gold to platinum. I don't know if I could do it that fast. And I'm thinking in my mind of all the classes that I taught to be able to get myself to that rank. But you could tell when you looked at his face that there was no doubt. Like no doubt at all that I could hit diamond in 30 days if I put my mind to it. And I really wanted it for myself and for my family. And I was willing to put in the hard work to be able to grow the rank and do the 3 things that grow your rank. Teaching classes, getting people on loyalty rewards, and training your leaders, training your business people, so you guys are all facing in the right direction. I can tell you a couple things that have helped me during the pandemic, because we've had to shift and pivot just a little bit, is getting FaceTime with my leaders. When I go and I sit in front of a leader and I just share their space for a few minutes, it's amazing. I just had a leader who was on the Dream 1000 board and hasn't really done much the last year, and had a couple of hours with her before I had to catch an airplane, and she just drove across 8 states to spend the weekend with me. And I think it was, and she signed up for my leaders retreat and, coming to that. And I think it was just that connection saying, hey, I hear you, I see you, you're valued. You don't need to stay in your home. Like, it's okay. You can come out and we can bond and we can have this special space together. So doing that, teaching classes and having fresh content to teach classes, especially 25 classes, has been getting people that haven't been coming to classes coming back again, especially people that only went to 1 class. They're coming back again, because when you teach 1 class, maybe they spend 50 PV. You teach 2 classes or 3 classes, maybe they're spending 100 or 190. You find out what their niche is, and maybe they're a mama and they're interested in seedlings, and you teach that. Now they're spending 250 or 300 PV. So it's pretty crazy how product education is really, really effective. Say you have a team of 9, and you teach until each of those 9 people have 15 people underneath them. Then you have a team of 135 people, and those 9 are getting their product for free as brand partners. And then if you continue teaching classes to those 135, because they get excited about the product and they know more than about 1 product or 2 products, they're spending 300 PV. Those 9 people now become a leg of 40,500 OGV. It's a concept called Friends of Friends. And it's how I built my organization from starter kit to silver in 12 weeks, was just getting out there and tapping into the friend circles of the people that I knew. So, Gary's probably right. If I had sat down and done all the things that I did to get to platinum, I probably could have had diamond in 1 month. It did take me 2 years to go from starter kit to diamond, but I just love his face, that there was no doubt and that he believed in me. This is a picture I have of the day that I met him in 2015 when we were going to Venice. There were 465 people that won that cruise, and I was number 464 on the leaderboard. So it's pretty special time with him, because this is when I really caught the vision of Young Living. But this is definitely my favorite picture of Gary's. This is when I was walking for diamond, And so Gary just walks past me and he goes to my 10-year-old son, and you can see he just kind of scoops him up. He gets down on his knees and he's just chit-chatting with him. He's like, "So Noah, he goes, I don't know if you're a Young Living, if you're in Young Living yet." And Noah's like, "No, sir, I'm not." And he goes, "Why not?" He said, "Well, policies and procedures, sir, says I have to be 16 and I'm only 10 years old." So I'm only 10. I'm only 10, Gary. And Gary says, "Well, what are you going to do when you turn 16, Noah Harnish?" And Noah's like, I'm going to get my Young Living kit and I'm going to do the business in Young Living. And it was so neat. I mean, the conversation was really sweet and really cute. But the thing that I thought was even more interesting is that there's people behind this curtain that are doing $250,000 of sales or more in a month that are getting honored. And Gary stopped the entire gala for a 10-year-old kid. Like the music's just going and everybody's standing behind the curtain. And Gary's just sitting there chatting it up for like 2 minutes with this little kid, because no matter who you were, you had value, you had purpose. And, I want you guys to remember that as you're out there and you're sharing oils and you're building your business. If you can share like Gary, where you are the only person in the room, the person you're talking to is the only person in the room, I don't think you're going to have a hard time bringing people into your organization, because they're what matters the most, right? When Gary was standing in front of you, nobody else existed. I mean, you could see he's not looking at anybody, and Noah's face is just lit up. And I couldn't believe somebody captured that out of the audience. So that's my favorite memory of Gary Young, is just that the moment where he was captivated with my youngest son of the 5 kids, because it really shows off who this man was, that it didn't matter what your credentials were, and it didn't matter how much power you had or what you could do for him. He loved you for you and who you were. So let's jump right into the Gary Young script. You can get this and go teach it yourself, and go teach the other classes as well, and just get excited about oils all over again. We have so many new products coming out this week and so many things to be excited about. Young Living is still just a massive innovator. It's just a company with incredible innovation. But now it's up to us to carry the torch of Gary, to bring oils to every home in the world. And that's why I wrote this book, because when you sit down and you share with people your passion, your love for oils, and you lead them to their wow moment, all of a sudden they realize, wow, this is pretty crazy stuff. Like the stuff that God made actually works. That's absolutely nuts. And then we've carried on Gary's mission of bringing oils to every home in the world. So let's start at the beginning. Who was Gary Young? And now I'm just reading right out of the Game Plan Oil script book. You can grab that at oilabilityteam.com. Well, to understand Gary Young, the founder of Young Living, you have to know his roots. The majority of us were raised on processed food and pharmaceuticals. We had access to the internet, cell phones, and at the very least, electricity and plumbing. Gary grew up in a very different world, almost as if he stepped back in time 200 years. He lived off the land in the rugged West. He was a real live mountain man, but a cowboy of sorts. His understanding of how to survive in the woods and how to treat the animals was very unique. I believe that his childhood laid the foundation for his convictions, along with a logging accident that forced him to look back to the earth for true healing, the type of healing that does not come synthetically. We're going to go on a brief adventure through Gary Young's life, because you can't understand Young Living or Seed to Seal unless you understand the heart of its creator. Seed to Seal is the protective process of safeguarding the components of the plants, and it could not exist in the form that it does without Gary's intuition and his conviction. His conviction came through his life experiences. If you understand those, you also understand why every single ingredient in every product mattered so much to Gary Young. You'll understand why the sourcing of every ingredient mattered so much to him, because he didn't want poison in the plants, and he knew that there had to be a place to go where the plants were uncontaminated. Gary saw that the world was changing, and it was harder and harder to get unadulterated, unhybridized wheat and oils and food and water. He saw that we had to get away from things like EMFs, electromagnetic fields. The body's really strong and it'll repair itself, but when it's bombarded daily with toxins, it becomes weak. To find answers, Gary looked to scripture, and he looked to the plants that God created. God was his foundation and his word was his bond, said Mary Young. He called the Bible his owner's manual. Gary grew up in a 16 by 20 cabin in the mountains of Idaho. When he was 4, he migrated to a 30 by 30 dirt roof cabin with his parents and 5 siblings. The cabin was 12 miles from town, and it had no electricity and no running water. In fact, he didn't have electricity in his home until he was 16 years old. His family also landed a hand cranked telephone the same year back in 1965, and he had vivid memories of growing wheat that was taller than his head on his father's ranch. I recommend that you grab the best book ever written on Gary. It was written by his wife, Mary Young. You can go to youngliving.com, grab a copy. It's called D. Gary Young, World Leader in Essential Oils. And this book will show you photos of his home and the ranch and the wilderness where he grew up. Gary had a life that most of us wouldn't have had unless we were alive back in the 1800s. It was just as you would picture it from the olden days, filled with farming and fields and plants and animals and wilderness and seasons and tranquility and a quieter place that's just harder to find today. The accident that launched a mission. On February 8th, 1973, when Gary was 24 years old, he was in a logging accident in Canada. A tree sheared off and fell on him, resulting in 3 open skull fractures, a ruptured spinal cord in 3 places, 11 ruptured discs, 16 broken or crushed vertebra, a broken pelvis, a broken scapula, a severed brachial plexus, and 19 broken bones, including every rib on his right side. He was confined to a wheelchair, and he was told that he would never walk again. He was on 13 drugs, including morphine and an antidepressant. Gary attempted suicide twice. He failed. He was financially ruined because of his medical bills. He lost his logging equipment. He lost his ranch. He lost his livestock. His wife took his children and left, unable to cope with the emotional burden. He attempted suicide a 3rd time, this time trying to starve himself. Gary only drank water and lemon juice for 253 days. Gary said, and this is a quote, "The lowest ebb in my life was when I tried to commit suicide and failed, not once, but 3 times. I had no place to retreat to when I realized I couldn't even die. Never before had I felt so disconnected with God, my family, and the world. I had nowhere to turn. Had it not been for my father, who came to my hospital room shaking his finger at me and told me to grow up and quit feeling sorry for myself, I might have continued to wallow in self-pity, depression, and eventually succeeded in ending my life. But Dad turned and he walked out, and he never came to visit me again. He made me so angry. I cried out to him saying, 'You don't know what it's like to be paralyzed and in constant pain with no drugs to help. If it's the last thing I do, I will get out of this bed and I will walk and I will ride my horse again.'" I'm not sure if "I will ride my horse again" is like the very first thing I would think to say to my dad after not seeing him, being in bed. But let me just connect it to you in this way. If you've ever been at a low point like that in your life, then you will know that the oils that you're using came from the man that came up with the very way of distilling those oils, that the man that did that felt the way that you feel too. Gary wanted to quit. And what a world we would have had if he had succeeded. After 2/3 of a year on only water and lemon juice, determined to take his life, he started to feel movement in his right toe. Doctors said that it was an unexpected medical phenomenon where he literally ate so little that the body did not have enough nutrients to manufacture scar tissue, and it allowed some nerve endings to reroute and to reconnect. So Gary stopped all of his medications to clear his mind, and that was ultimately when he began experimenting with different natural remedies and grew in his knowledge of herbs and natural healing. And it began this multi-year process of learning to walk all over again. Pain was something that he would live with for the rest of his life. But Gary was never supposed to live past 70 years old. He was never supposed to live that long because of the serious accident that he'd had. His injuries were just too severe. And so that's pretty crazy. But after several years of plants and herbs and lemon and hydration and plenty of rest, he also regained the use of his arm. And so time to rise. Gary had no way to financially survive, but he had one working arm. So one of his arms isn't working, his other arm is working, and he's in this wheelchair. And so he started painting pictures, and he began selling the pictures. He painted murals from his wheelchair and on the office walls of lawyers and doctors. And when jobs began dwindling, he applied for a truck driver position to haul chips. And the owner laughed and he asked, he's like, "How are you going to drive a truck in a wheelchair?" Gary told him that if the truck was equipped with hand controls, then he would drive it. So it took over an hour, but he wheeled over to the truck. He pulled himself up into it. He reached down, he pulled up his wheelchair, and he used the hand controls to drive the truck across the lot, and he got hired. Gary said, it was amazing how a feeling of wholeness started to hover over me now that I was working again. This launched a period of recovery for Gary that I believe started with emotional healing because he needed purpose and now he had it. He needed to find wholeness because there were others that were suffering that were not going to get any relief if he gave up. If he healed himself, then he could heal them too. So Gary moved to Southern California and he enrolled in a naturopathic college and he opened an office and he built a research center for physical and emotional wellness. And through 13 years of pain, Gary went from a wheelchair to a walker to crutches to a cane and then eventually to really painful walking. And so we're in the next section of the lecture, which is, this is a photo of Gary, Time to Rise. And next up is Gary Meets Oils. And I would love to tell you that Gary used oils to learn to walk again, but the truth is that he found them more than a decade after his accident. He did, however, use the plants and the herbs as part of his healing protocol. He also learned early on that his cells required the right nutrients to be able to heal themselves. And so that led him to learn about the power of food and about supplements. He became a master at making supplements with plants that were grown carefully without poisonous pesticides, herbicides, and weed killers. It was while he was in this place in California that Gary came across his first bottle of essential oils. A woman from Switzerland named Anne Marie had grown up working in the natural health products industry. She eventually had her own laboratory and formulated health products, and she'd been studying essential oils for several years. So she invited Gary to a conference in Geneva, Switzerland, to look at the science on essential oils and on the respiratory system. And this is where Gary goes into essential oils mode. It was like another switch just flipped for him. The first switch was when he realized that he still had purpose in his life. And the second was when he realized that the answer for his setbacks lied with plants. And the third became his introduction to the world of essential oils. And Gary's appetite for oils could not be satiated. Gary was invited by French medical doctors to travel and join them as they made their rounds in the hospitals conducting research. At the time, they were making some of the most authentic oils in the world. And so Gary traveled all over France and he returned with 13 oils and began experimenting. I don't know if you know this, but at the time when he was playing with oils in the 80s, there wasn't a single book written in English about essential oils. Every single book out there was written in French. So with no written information, no internet, and with no experience, Gary began infusing his herbal supplements with oils, and he was impressed how much better they worked. People laughed at Gary, they slandered him, they told him that what he was doing was impossible, but he decided rather than to shut it all down, just to learn the next thing in oiling, which was distillation. After all, he'd already had his wow moment with the 13 oils that he brought home, and he already knew that they worked. So now it was time for him to distill it, to distill the oils himself. So distilling lavender. Gary carried his backpack and his sleeping bag and he flew to France. The French, this by the way is a picture of the Mona farm. This is our lavender farm. This is not the first farm that Gary put together, but it's such a beautiful, beautiful picture. The French had a history of being the best distillers in the world of essential oils. So he observed and admired the fields and the distilleries from the road. Very few people spoke English and he had trouble communicating. So his first trip was not incredibly successful. 4 years after his first introduction to oils, Gary was lecturing at the Whole Life Expo in California, and a man named Jean-Noel Landel was visiting from France, hoping to find someone that he could sell his lavender oil to. He saw that Gary was infusing his supplements with oil, and he invited him to his farm in France, not thinking that Gary would actually take him up on it. A month later, Gary's plane landed in Paris. The meeting between the two men was truly anointed. Landel's wife was American and she spoke fluent English, so the two of them could understand each other. Gary showed the couple how to massage their 6-month-old's feet with lavender, and they watched as their son fell asleep. Gary also taught them how to use VitaFlex to increase their technique arsenal using essential oils, and it forged a lifelong friendship between the two families. The door was now wide open to Gary Young for connections in France. Jean-Noel's son, Nicholas, the little one who got the foot rub, now works at the Young Living Lavender Farm in Saumon-le-Roton, France. It was Jean-Noel who introduced Gary to Philippe Malbonneau. Philippe had a laboratory and he opened Gary's mind to emotional uses of essential oils. He believed that oils carried a spiritual essence, not just a physical one, that influenced how an individual responded. Gary was also introduced to a man by the name of Marcel Espiau. He was, I'm going to just get a little closer to you guys here and talk to you this way. He was initially irritated with the American who kept asking too many questions, but eventually he invited him to come and see his distillery. Gary offered to keep the firebox burning overnight, and Marcel came in the morning to switch places with him. Gary's work ethic won the Frenchman's respect, and eventually they became really good friends. They didn't speak each other's language, but they communicated through their love of oils. Gary learned more and more about distillation, and he had a burning passion to create his own distillery in the United States. Even Marcel laughed at him, saying, "The American wants to do what the French have done for hundreds of years." Mary wrote about Gary saying, quote, "But once the dream was there, it was as though it was already done." Gary had already forged 3 strong friendships from France, but there was one more person that he really wanted to meet, and his name was Henri Viard. He's also known as the father of distillation. So just to put this in perspective for you, Henri had tried to distill rocks to see what they would give us. The trouble was that Henri was not open to having visitors, especially Americans. But Gary was persistent. It took 5 years. But one night, Henri came to Jean Noel's house while Gary happened to be having dinner with him. And he sat through the entire meal and he did not say a word to Gary. And at the end, he gave him a really brief interview. And Gary answered the final question this way. He said, "I believe essential oils are the closest physical substance on the earth that carries the spirit of God." Henri responded, "You are right, and anyone that messes with them should be treated like a criminal," and he abruptly left the room. When Jean Noel returned after seeing Henri out, he said to Gary, "Henri wants to see you on his mountain at 6 o'clock in the morning." And so Gary was there. This is the father of distillation in France, the #1 country in the world at the time for essential oils. And so Gary spent many days cutting and harvesting lavender, thyme, and rosemary, then distilling them. And those days turned into weeks and into months. Gary traveled back and forth between the US and France. Between Marcel and Henri, he had 2 of the best living teachers in the world to show him distillation. And then we have the beginning of an oils empire. For 4 years, Gary traveled all over France studying. He and Jean Noel leased their first farm where they learned about planting, harvesting, and extraction. He drew plans. At this point, he knew he would have his own distillery. Gary eventually ended up in Spokane, Washington, where he purchased a 1/4-acre plot of land. And it was there that he planted his first lavender crop with seeds that he had brought back from France. The seeds grew into healthy plants with an intoxicating aroma. Gary began distilling them by welding 2 pressure cookers together and placing them on top of a stovetop in the kitchen. Lavender plants need to be older to produce quality oil. So at this point, Gary's were only 2 years old, but he could not wait. The experiment produced 3 milliliters of lavender oil, or about 1/4 of a teaspoon. So he had it analyzed by a good friend, a famous American aromatherapist named Kurt Schnaubelt. You guys might be familiar with some of his books. They're really well known. And he was really impressed with the quality of oil from such young plants. So that was the God nudge that Gary needed to jump in 100%. And of course, Gary Young did it. The next plants to go into the cooker were pineapple sage, common sage, and thyme. All of the crops were planted in the garden in Spokane, and all of them were grown from seed. They were eventually transported to a farm in St. Mary's, Idaho. A year later, Gary knew he was going to need some more land. So a plot behind an office building was just not going to cut it. So he sold his truck and he purchased 160 acres in the mountains of St. Mary's, Idaho. It had not been plowed in 50 years, and it was virgin land. 5 decades earlier, it had only been used for pasture for the cattle during the summer. So he tilled tons of manure, microbes, enzymes, and foliage feed into the ground, bringing the pH of that soil from 4.5 all the way up to 7.5. He designed a firebox boiler with a 250-liter distilling chamber, and the very first Young Living farm was officially launched. Gary believes deeply that if you see the farms, you see the roots of this company. You need to be there, though, to catch the vision. So today, you can travel to St. Mary's in Idaho, and you can go see his tractor. You can see the fields of the Melissa plants growing, and you can see the seedlings and the greenhouses, and you can see the first plot of land. It's just as silent and just as pure as it was in 1992 when he first started. In fact, you can see any of the Young Living farms. It was in Gary's heart that you could see what mattered so much to him. He used to say, "You can't grow oil if you don't know your soil." And that's so true. So peppermint oil was the first distilled at the Young Living farm. Bob Skinner, the owner of the machine shop that made Gary's distillery cooker, said there was so much excitement that Gary felt when just a few drops of oil fell from the spout into the quart jar that was sitting on the tree stump. It was obviously a great triumph for him. And so he goes through a whole bunch of problems trying to grow these plants. I mean, the clary sage got eaten by deer because apparently it's an aphrodisiac for them. And Gary couldn't fight them organically. So he had to move all of the clary sage plants to Utah where there were fewer deer. And then the thyme plants weren't growing. And he realized they were just sitting on the dirt because the gophers were eating the root system under the ground. Peppermint grew well, but the grass around it did too. So because of the weeds and the cold, Gary had to move all the peppermint plants to Utah. So he had a lot of victories and he had a lot of problems. But the big question is what happened next? So you know how the very first Young Living farm began, but how did everything else happen? Like, how did Young Living become a $2 billion company with hundreds of oils? It literally happened one drop at a time, from the help of every volunteer, from every single wow moment, from all of the perseverance. It would take a great deal of time to log every loss and every victory for Gary Young, but I can tell you there were far more losses than victories. It would be a lot like watching Thomas Edison invent the light bulb. I mean, he had 1,000 failures before the light bulb was a hit. But just as it was for Edison, it ended well with Gary too, with this company that just continues to bless millions and millions of people, more than 7 million people now in Young Living. I can't imagine a world without Young Living at this point. Before it all happened, though, it was hard to imagine a world with Young Living unless you were Gary Young. He always saw things well before they happened, and he sought out an unusually large number of adventures. He had vision despite a long list of adversities. If not for that vision, we would not have Young Living as we have it today. So when people tell you no, when they tell you that they don't believe in the power of oils or of food, when you think that your lifestyle is a farce, I want you to remember Gary's story. Sometimes you have to take a few steps back from people who speak death over what you can see in your head. The Lord plants visions in us that were meant to be carried out. And when we ignore them, the evil one has another victory by our silence and by our fear. So let me wrap up just with a little bit about the character of Gary Young, because I want you to remember Gary by those of us that knew him, by those of us that traveled with him and got to see him in action. It's always easy to judge somebody else's dream, but the reality is that millions of us benefit from Gary's dreams every single day because they happened. And they happened because he did not listen to the naysayers. He stood on top of fear. He went out and did things that scared him. And so one farm became 2 farms and 3 farms and 17 farms and hundreds of partner farms. And now we're sitting here with 300 oils and 300 oil infused products as the largest essential oils company in the world. The man with an intuition like no other. As I wrap up here, I'm going to share my screen one last time. Yeah, the beginning of an essential oils empire, and Young Living explodes. Gary was humble, and he gave all that he had to help people. He was the first off the bus to carry the suitcases of those behind him, and he would give you his jacket if you were cold. Every chapter of the Game Plan Oils script book, where this script comes from, it opens with the way that Gary treated the diamonds. He won their respect, and he has my respect. So now you know his story from those of us that were there, and you understand why Seed to Seal was so important to him. Adulterated oils do not speak to the body in the same way. You cannot give a cell poison and expect it to perform. Gary was a smart man, and he was very intuitive, and he knew that. If Gary Young was at a gala, he would stop at all to hear the words of a child. He'd go to dangerous parts of the world to make sure that he had the best oil for you. He never stopped researching and questioning the standard. He always looked for a better way that had not been done, and when he couldn't find it, he retreated to the mountains, to God's living room, and he prayed in the Palo Santo forest to be alone with the Lord and ask questions. He remained still enough to listen to the answers. Gary was the gentle grandpa who paused to hear you. If you were speaking, you were the only one in the room. And as his company grew, he never lost who he was. He was an innovator, a scientist, a philanthropist, a gifted teacher. He had a work ethic that rivaled most, despite the blinding pain that he lived with every day from his logging accident. He would stand on stage and hug 1,000 leaders who ranked at conventions, smiling, and nobody knew how much he hurt because he never said a word. Your moment on stage was more important than his pain. Gary was a genius aromatherapist who created blends like Thieves. He redefined distillation globally. He created the first large-scale essential oils network marketing company in the world. He befriended a sultan and doctors and biochemists and famous distillers from China to Oman to France. His love for people was so infectious that even isolated men respected and befriended Gary. Every script in the Game Plan Oil script book is a byproduct of something that Gary created. He truly is the father of the modern essential oils movement. And because Gary never gave up, you and I can share this space together. Gary won and lost and lost and won, and he lived more than most of us live in a lifetime. And that's why you don't need to be perfect to share. That's why you don't need to know it all. You just need to remember Gary's story. Gary said, when you see and experience things as I have for the last 30 years, there is no question in my mind that there is a God in heaven. These oils truly are, without question, his medicine, his natural remedies. This is the future of medicine. When it comes to an injury or an organ transplant, of course, there's no better place to be than in the hands of a skilled physician. But when it comes to dealing with sickness, we're in archaic times. God has given us the tools. He's given us the answer to strengthen our immune system so our body can fight sickness and diseases that exist on this planet. But it's up to us to seek and search. As it says in the Bible, ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be open to you. Matthew 7:7. The knowledge is there if we look for it. If we ask and we go with prayer in our heart, we will be directed. End quote. And so that's why we carry on Gary's mission to bring oils to every home in the world. Seek, search, and speak. You now know the heart of Gary Young. I'm going to end with this and a huge shout out to Jen O'Sullivan for the honor of speaking. I pray that this has helped you to know Gary a little bit better. If you like this book, you like the script, go snag it on my website, oilabilityteam.com. And let's end with the heart of Gary Young. If you aren't living on the edge, you're taking up too much space. Thank you for your legacy because of Gary and Gary Young. I pray that that has just been a huge blessing to you guys. We'll have this PowerPoint up. Well, let me get this out of here. We'll have the PowerPoint up on my website, oilabilityteam.com. A little bit later on when we launch this, we're in the middle of doing a boot camp on my page, Oilability with Sarah. And so you'll be able to find it when we launch this class. So Terry says, I think there are a few people in history who have been so maligned as Gary. This is beautiful. Thank you. Let me do a couple of giveaways. So Terry Walker, I'm going to give away a 4-bundle set, a script book set to you. So just go ahead and email me at oilabilitywithsarah@gmail.com and we'll make sure that we get that in the mail to you. Monica Jones Stephen, I'm going to send a 4-book set to you as well. So one of each of the script books. That's where the script comes from. And Darlene Dentroma Lopez, I'm going to send a 4-book set to you as well. Lisa Davis, I'm also going to send a 4-book set to you. So congratulations to all of our winners. Huge shout out to Jen O'Sullivan and all of her hard work on this page. She's just such a gifted aromatherapist. And I pray that, that this really helped you to see the heart of Gary Young in a totally different way. I love you guys. It was a real honor to have some time with you. And I'll see you over on my page for boot camp. And I hope that you're able to get the script book and just have a fun summer of reading and sharing with your teams. Enjoy convention and I'll see you soon. Bye.